Welcome back to part 2 of our carport storage video. In today's video, we will be covering the middle section of this storage unit. In part 1, we covered the rightmost section, and then later in part 3, we'll be covering the leftmost section. If you have not already seen part 1, I strongly suggest going back and taking a look at that video. There will be some items that I reference in this video that may confuse you if you aren't aware of them from the previous. That being said, this middle section is a little more involved, so this video will be a little longer since there are elements to it that are a little bit different, quite a bit different, than the first section. And with that in mind, let's get started. In order to continue assembling this project, I needed to make several more posts. I made 6 more using my newly discovered Z method to finish the middle section. Similar to the process to make the right section's posts, I jointed, planed, table sawed, and miter sawed the boards to the needed dimensions prior to the lamination process. I did not spend too much time worrying about the lengths of each individual board. My goal was to end up with posts that would be roughly 8 feet long once glued together. Once I had enough boards milled to size, I paired together boards that were of nearly equal length. I clamped these pieces together with the ends flush on one side and cut the other ends with the miter saw. This ensured the pair were of equal length. I made a very simple jig that created 4 inches of separation between the ends of the boards. Using this jig, I glued and nailed together each pair. This method allowed for the Z style of connecting the post pieces together. Each post required 6 total boards to complete. 3 pairs joined end to end completed the assembly. A single Z section was made on the top and bottom pair, and 2 Z sections were made on the middle section. As you can see from the video, I am putting together the 2 lengths of boards that I had previously cut to equal length, and I am laminating them together using my 4-inch jig. Once I get them glued together and then nailed with my pin nailer, I take them and put them in clamps so that it can put a little bit of pressure to help with the lamination process. You pretty much rinse and repeat for 3 different sections to make up one singular post. As I mentioned previously, the top and bottom sections will be a little bit different from the middle section. For example, the bottom of a post, or the first section, will have the bottom flush, and then the top will be separated with the Z method. The middle section of a post will have both the top and bottom separated with the Z method, and the top section, or the third section of a post, will have the bottom of it with the Z method, and the top will be flush. Hopefully that makes sense. Using dominoes, glue, and brad nails, I attached each section of the post together. Once together, I clamped the 2 connecting Z section joints overnight. I repeated this process for the remaining 5 posts needed for the middle section of the storage rack. As you can see here, I'm test fitting each one of these Z sections to make sure that they fit well prior to the glue up. I have found that this step is very crucial, and if you skip it, you tend to run into a lot of trouble. Once test fitted and happy with the results, I decided to do the glue up. I start by smearing glue on the edges as well as a single face for the Z method. After that, I put a little bit of glue in the hole for the domino, and then I put each domino inside by hammering them into place. I then slather a little bit of glue on the dominoes themselves and then set that section off to the side. I then grab the section that I'm going to be placing on top of the one that I just glued together and put a little bit of glue on that edge and face as well. Once I'm happy with that, I start putting the two together. At first I used a mallet and tried hammering the top of it, but it really didn't work all that great. Believe it or not, the fastest method, and I'm just going to say best method for me anyway, that I found was just to take the piece and literally hammer it into the ground a few times, and it seemed to slide right on, and it was much faster. I then do the same thing for the third section. Put a little bit of glue, put in some dominoes, connect them together, and then tap them all together. Once that is all done, then I clamp the sections and set it off to the side to dry. With the posts made, it was time to move on to the shelves. I decided to make 5 shelves spread out in 2 sections. 2 shelves on one section and 3 on the other. By installing only 2 shelves on one section, it allowed me to leave room to store my snowblower underneath the first shelf. It had always been difficult to find a good place to store it, but now it has a home. Similar to everything else on this build, I had to mill all my needed boards to the required dimensions. Once complete, I started assembling the frame. The frame consists of just a rectangle. I also put 2 sections in the middle, little boards, to create a little bit of rigidity and strength for the actual shelf. I used a simple process of glue and screws to put all of these together. Once I knew that I had each area square, I drove the screws into the side and then worked my way around until I had a full rectangle with 2 slats in the middle. I basically repeated that process 4 more times to create the frame for all 5 of my soon-to-be installed shelves. I also had to cut out some plywood for the tops of these shelves. In terms of dimensions, I decided to keep it simple and go with a 4-foot wide by 2-foot deep shelf. They are actually just slightly underneath those dimensions, but pretty close. I only had a couple pieces of OSB, and so I did my best to optimize the amount of sheathing that I could use so that I could actually have 5 shelves. And this brings us to the installation part of the video. As you can see, the 2 sections that I'm going to be putting in the middle, the first one is already done. I mentioned this in episode 1, but my wife helped me install part of this at the very start of this project. This is basically where it left off, where she and I kind of parted ways in terms of help. From this point on in the project, I was left to my own devices. So I am currently working on the second section, which will be comprised of 2 different shelves. The first shelf will be at the same height as the second shelf in the first section, just to make room for my snowblower underneath, as I mentioned previously. In order to install these shelves, I had to screw on an additional length of boards so that I had something to place the shelf onto and screw into the post. Once I have enough slats on the 2 posts screwed in to put the shelf down, I'm able to put one section of it and try to level it off. I used my little step ladder here to brace the opposite side because I didn't have an extra pair of hands. So using this method, I put my level down and I leveled it as best as I could, and I screwed the side of the shelf into the post itself. After that, I was able to get the back post, which will be the third one on the left side of the shelf, and tried to put it into place and then screw it in so that I have another brace to hold up the shelf. You'll see here in a minute, but I actually do this wrong, and I kind of laugh at myself a little bit, but I screwed the post onto the wrong section of the shelf. I ended up having to go back and fix it here in a minute. But with that back one screwed in, I can then move on to the front one, or the fourth post, for the shelf. Using a similar method, I try to level it up as best I can, using the levelers attached to the post as well as the level on the shelf itself. And I line it up as best I can, and then I screw the shelf into the post and hold it into place. As you can see there, I give the thumbs up because I think that I did a really good job, only to find out here in a minute that I screwed it up. Right here is where I realized that I accidentally screwed it into the wrong place. So I gotta go and do a little rework by unscrewing it. It's not like it's a huge deal, it's only a couple of screws. But it is funny, I don't think I've ever done a project where I didn't make at least a couple of mistakes, and a lot of them are really stupid things like this. Luckily easy to fix, as I mentioned, so I go ahead and get that set up, and then that next section, as far as the first shelf, is all set. Now that I have the 4 posts squared away and in place, I can put my sheathing on top, which fits perfectly. And then I can start the process of screwing it down to the frame itself. To keep the screws aligned, I use a square and I draw a little line where the middle sections are. That way I don't drive screws into nothing. I put a screw in every corner and work my way down the edges as well as the middle just to hold it in place. It's probably overkill, but it's not going to go anywhere. Once I put that first one in, I realized I didn't put some bracing underneath. So those 2 new posts, I should have put bracing up, but I forgot, so I have to do a little backtracking. Luckily here, I don't have to get perfect with the first couple of pieces, so I actually used some scrap that were the same width as my posts, and just started screwing them in on my way up. I did have to bevel them at that 5 degree that I mentioned in the first episode, since my carport slants downward, but that wasn't really a huge deal. The only piece that I had to be precise on was that last little section there at the top. So I had to make a couple of trips to the miter saw to shave off a little bit here and there until I got a really good fit. Once I got a great fit, then I just screwed it into the posts. With that complete, I could start working on a similar process for the section above the first shelf to make room for the second shelf. I did a similar method as I did on the bottom 2 there. I just used some scraps and screwed them into the side of the post until I got close to where my next shelf bottom was going to be. And then I measured out the last one and put it into place. I worked all the way around all four because I clearly needed some bracing for all four posts, and screwed all of those in. And once I got that completed, I was able to start putting the shelf on. It was a little awkward getting the frame in place because it's higher up, but I figured it out, and it fit on there quite well. You can see from this picture that it kind of set itself up there pretty good, and when I did check it for level, it was perfectly level, which it should be, since I had all the lengths the same and I had the bottom, or the first shelf, leveled off. This one was much easier once it was in place to screw in than the first one because it was actually holding itself up. So I just went around to each corner and drove in 2 screws that held it in place. After all the corners were screwed in, and I was satisfied with where it was, I grabbed the other piece of sheathing for the shelf and put it into place, and it fit like a glove. I did the same method as I did with the first shelf. I grabbed my T-square and drew some lines so that I wouldn't miss any of my screws into the middle slats. Once again, it was a little awkward because of the height, but I figured it out, kind of. So I went through, screwed down all of the corners, and then went through the middle as well as the sides, just like the first shelf. And that completes the second episode of this storage build. If you have any questions or have any comments, please leave them down below. I would love to hear some feedback from you guys. And I will catch you in episode 3. See ya.